All right, guys, so we're starting with Unit 1, Discussion 1, and this is going to cover the Earth systems, biotic and abiotic factors, and niches. So again, that's our table of contents here. So we're going to start with the Earth systems. There are 4 systems of the ecosphere. The ecosphere being everything that's part of our world and all of these subspheres. But when we want to talk about one specific part, we'll often break it down. So the first sphere that we're going to talk about is the biosphere, and that includes all living things. And the biosphere has the subsphere of the anthrosphere, which is in relation to humans. I do want to clarify here that this is not just the existence of humans, but it's also how humans interact, the effect they have on the ecosystems around them, and those sort of things. So when we're talking about the anthrosphere, we're looking at more than just single humans in a spotlight. Next is the hydrosphere, and this includes all liquid and surface water. This is fresh and salt water, and it also includes the cryosphere, which is all of the ice. Third is the geosphere, and this includes the Earth itself, so rocks, the crust, those tectonic plates, mountains, things like that. And last but not least is the atmosphere, which includes all gases found in air, water, vapor, and just anything up in the air. This is often broken down into layers based on composition, like the stratosphere versus other components. So next we're going to jump a little bit and we're going to talk about abiotic, biotic factors. So an ecosystem is defined as all living things, both biotic in a particular area, combined with the non-living or abiotic parts of that environment. So the biotic factors, again, these are the living things, their interactions, so animals, the predator-prey interactions, things of that nature. And then abiotic are going to be the non-living components that include interactions with the various Earth systems. So how much physical space is there? What's the precipitation levels, temperatures, nutrient availability? Less in predator-prey, but more like nitrogen or sulfur or other things that different species may need to survive within that environment. So we're going to talk about niches, because following on that topic of survival and how species survive within an ecosystem. So a niche is defined as the role an organism fulfills within that ecosystem. There are 3 types of niches that we are going to talk about. So there is the ecological niche, and that's the functional position or role of an organism within its environment along with the conditions for survival. You can think of this one as kind of like the bare minimum. Here's what this organism absolutely has to have in order to be a part of this ecosystem to survive. Our fundamental niche are conditions needed to create an ideal niche for an organism, and this is not realistic. Very few organisms will be able to live in their ideal home, their ideal niche with their ecosystem, mainly because there's too much competition, but we're going to get to that. And last but not least is a realized niche, and this is the actual role a species takes in its ecosystem. And again, this may not be ideal. They may have to take a subpar role to make sure they can survive. So again, comparing the 3, ecological, that's our bare minimum, what we have to have. Our fundamental is if everything were perfect and you got everything you wanted. And then the realized niche is what you actually get in the ecosystem. So, as we're talking about niches and roles, what then happens when you have 2 organisms that fulfill that same niche or that would live in that same niche? We have what's called the competitive exclusion principle. And this states that 2 species that compete for the exact same resources cannot coexist in an ecosystem. In simpler terms, over time, one species will eventually beat out the other for those resources and they'll eliminate their competition. Now, this isn't taking into account if these organisms have multiple sources of resources that are different. So maybe they have some that overlap that others don't. This principle applies when they share all of the same resources and they're competing for those critical ones. So how do we have diversity if species can't share them? The answer is that species adapt to fill untapped niches so that similar species with similar needs don't overlap. This allows them to sidestep that competition and to coexist alongside each other instead. And this can be something as simple as living in the top part of a tree instead of the middle part to avoid fighting with other birds for a place to put your nest. It can be something as complex as shifting when your mating period is so that way you have more resources for food because everybody else is not also trying to mate and have babies at the same time. Those are all ways that they can adapt their niches to help them fit better in their environment. So we are going to be doing an estuary activity this week. We're going to explore our Elkhorn Slough Reservation and talk a bit about that. So, an estuary is an ecosystem found in a semi enclosed coastal body of water. What that means is it means some of the water's coming in, so it's not fully blocked off, but it's not fully open. And this creates what's called brackish water. And brackish water is created by mixing fresh and salt water. It's not as salty as the salt water, but it's much, much saltier than fresh, and you wouldn't want to drink it. So before class, you're going to create your estuary origami organelle following the directions linked in our Google Classroom or in our Kahoot. And then you can also check out your student workbook for that. So here you can see a picture of the Elkhorn Slough Reservation, which we'll be looking at this week. You can see that water coming in, the land partially locking it, but not fully enclosing.